In today's video, we're diving deep into the science behind sleep and uncovering the fascinating mechanisms that govern how and why we get tired. From adenosine buildup to the mysterious circadian rhythms that control our body's clock, you'll discover what really happens when you stay awake for too long and how factors like dopamine and adrenaline also play into your energy levels. Stick around to learn not only how sleep works, but also how you can optimize your rest without stressing over the perfect 8 hours.
Let's go with a big first question. Why do humans need sleep?
There's one mechanism that's very clear, that's super important, which is that the longer we are awake, the more adenosine accumulates in our brain. And adenosine binds to adenosine receptors, no surprise there, and it creates the feeling of sleepiness, independent of time of day or night. So there are two mechanisms. One is we get sleepy as adenosine accumulates. The longer we've been awake, the more adenosine is accumulated in our system. But how sleepy we get for a given amount of adenosine depends on where we are in this so-called circadian cycle. And the circadian cycle is just this very, very well-conserved oscillation. It's a temperature oscillation where you go from a low point. Typically, if you're awake during the day and you're asleep at night, your lowest temperature point will be like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and then your temperature will start to creep up as you wake up in the morning, and then it'll peak in the late afternoon, and then it'll start to drop again toward the evening, and then you get sleep again. That oscillation in temperature takes 24 hours.
Plus or temperature.
Yeah, plus or minus an hour. So there are two mechanisms, the adenosine accumulation and the circadian time point that we happen to be at. And those converge to create a sense of sleepiness or wakefulness. The simple way to reveal these two mechanisms, to uncouple them, is stay up for 24 hours, and you will find that even though you've been, let's say you stay up midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., I will get very sleepy around 3, 4 a.m., but then around 5 or 6 or 7 a.m., which is my normal wake-up time, I'll start to feel more alert, even though adenosine has been accumulating further. So adenosine is higher for me the longer I stay up, and yet I feel more alert than I did a few hours ago. And that's because these are two interacting forces. So adenosine makes you sleepy, and then just how sleepy or how awake you feel also depends on where you are in this temperature oscillation that takes 24 hours. I think it's important that people have highlighted the importance of sleep and getting enough rest. I do think it's gone too far, and now I'm editorializing a little bit, but I think that we've created this anxiety about sleep that if we don't sleep enough, we're going to get dementia. If we don't get sleep, then, the reproductive axis is going to, completely crash. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary, and as well, just based on personal experience and based on the fact that, sure, it may be that a solid 8 hours with no interruptions in there, or 9 or 10, could do great benefit, but you can do really well if you do what you say, which is you wake up, you don't want to start stressing about it, creating this meta stress about sleep. Being happy, it is actually one of the most powerful things that you can do, not allowing yourself to go down that rabbit hole of stress, for the following reason. A lot of our fatigue is not due just to the buildup of adenosine or time of day, the circadian thing we were talking about earlier. An additional factor is that effort is related to the release of epinephrine, of adrenaline in our brain and body. At some point, those levels get so high that we get stressed mentally, we get stressed physically, and we want to give up. There are good data published in Cell showing that signal, the epinephrine signal, eventually accumulates, and there's a quit point. Dopamine, the molecule of pursuit and reward and feeling good, resets our ability to be in effort. There's a study done by a colleague of mine at Stanford that showed that positive anticipation about the next day events actually is a powerful metric for creating quality sleep, even if the sleep is very reduced. So this was work done out of Harvard Medical. It was Bob Stickgold's lab, and Emily Hoagland did this study that showed, looking at performance on OCHEM scores. What she showed was that consistency of total sleep duration was far more important for performance on these exams than total sleep duration itself. So it's not that just getting more sleep allows you to perform better. Consistently getting about the same amount of sleep is better for performance, at least on OCHEM, than just getting more. There's no evidence that 8 is better than 6. That you could very well do better on 6 than on 8. There are a few other things that turn out to be strong parameters for success in this domain. For instance, your entire life, waking or asleep, is broken up into these 90-minute ultradian cycles. If you look at ability to attend or do math problems or do anything, drive, performance tends to ramp up slowly within a 90-minute cycle, peak, and then come down at the end of that 90-minute cycle. And in sleep, we go through these stage 1, 2, 3, 4, REM, et cetera, those on 90-minute ultradian cycles as well. Ending your sleep after a 90-minute cycle, at the near the end of a 90-minute cycle, say at the end of 6 hours, in many cases is better for you than sleeping an additional hour, 7 hours, and waking up in the middle of an ultradian cycle. If you wake up in the middle of an ultradian cycle, sometimes, not always, you can be very groggy for a long period of time. I certainly do better on 6 hours than I do on 7. I happen to like an 8-hour sleep. It feels great, but I haven't slept an entire 8 hours without waking up in the middle of the night at some point in, I don't know, forever. I can't remember. It's probably some point in infancy, and I function well during the day. I think that's an important parameter, is how do you feel during the day? Almost everybody experiences some sort of dip in energy in the late afternoon, or what would correlate to their temperature peak. And that's a good time of day to get either a 90-minute or less nap, or if you're not a napper or you can't nap, feet elevated has been shown to be good for clear out of some of this. The glymphatic system is this kind of like sewer system of the brain that you can clear stuff out. So legs elevated, or one thing that I'm a big proponent of and that my lab has been studying is what I now call NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. Non-sleep deep rest is allowing your system to drop into states of real calm that allow you to get better at falling asleep later. And they can be very restorative for cognitive and motor function. There's at least one study out of Denmark that shows that the basal ganglia, which is an area of the brain that's involved in motor planning and action, one of these 20-minute non-sleep deep rest protocols resets levels of neuromodulators like dopamine in the basal ganglia to the same levels that they were right after a long night's sleep. So I also respectfully or semi-respectfully disagree with the idea that you can't recover lost sleep. What does that mean? I mean, that there's no IRS for sleep. So what does it mean to be in debt for sleep? If you're falling asleep during the day and you're sleepy, like you're falling asleep, that's a good sign of insomnia. It means you're not sleeping enough at night. If you're fatigued during the day, but you're not falling asleep, so you're just exhausted, but you're not finding yourself falling asleep in meetings and in conversation, then chances are you're fatiguing your system through something else. I think a 20-minute nap is pretty fantastic. And if you can't sleep, some people have trouble napping, then learning to relax the body as much as possible, like trying to remove all expression from your face, completely letting your body kind of float. There are a few people who it's very hard for them to allow themselves to go into these states, but for most people, they're gone.